For years, I thought my father died when I was little. That's what my mother always said. But after she passed, I found a box in her closet filled with letters, photos, and a truth she'd hidden my whole life. My father wasn't dead. He just wasn't the man I thought he was. The discovery shattered everything I believed about my childhood. Yet somehow, it also made me understand her choices, her silence, her fears, her pain. This story is about secrets kept out of love, and how the truth, even when late, can still set your heart free. Hear this. For 40 years, I believed my father was a hero. I mourned a man I never knew. I invented memories of someone who only existed in my mother's stories and my own imagination. I grew up with a ghost in my house, a presence that shaped everything I was, everything I wanted to be, everything I feared I would never become. My entire childhood was built on a single story, that my father loved me deeply, that he was taken from us too soon, and that his death was an act of fate, not a choice. But the truth was far more complicated. And when I finally discovered it, it didn't just shatter my understanding of my father. It shattered my understanding of my mother. It fractured my relationship with my sister. And it forced me to confront the question that haunts every person who's been lied to by someone they love. Do I forgive her for protecting me, or do I resent her for stealing my right to know? Welcome to my Reddit diaries, where every story reveals the unseen battles within families. Don't forget to subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The bedroom was quiet. That's the first thing I remember about that morning. It was too quiet. My mother's alarm clock wasn't ringing. Her radio wasn't playing the soft jazz she always listened to while getting ready for work. Even the house itself seemed to be holding its breath. I was standing in the doorway, and I didn't want to go inside. My sister had called me that morning. She said Mom wasn't waking up. She said the hospice nurse had already been there, and everything was over. Everything. 48 hours of waiting, and then suddenly nothing. The disease had won, and I had missed it. I had been driving home for 3 hours when she called, and I wasn't there at the end. I would spend years wondering if that mattered. If my mother, in her final moments, had been thinking of me, or if she had already let go. Now, standing in that doorway, I looked at the room I had grown up seeing only occasionally. My mother kept her private space sacred. Even as a child, I understood there was something in that room that belonged only to her. There was a sadness in the air, a weight that even her careful organization and soft furniture couldn't hide. The bed was neatly made. Her nightstand held a glass of water, half empty or half full, depending on your perspective, and a small lamp. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Everything except the absence of her breathing, her presence, her life. My sister was in the living room. I could hear her on the phone with someone, the funeral home, probably, or maybe a distant relative. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to be alone in that room, in that last space where my mother had existed. I wanted to understand her in death in a way I never quite had in life. That's when I saw the closet. The door was slightly open. My mother's clothes hung in perfect rows, organized by color and season. She was meticulous about everything. Her life was compartmentalized, ordered, controlled. And then I saw it, the wooden box shoved behind her winter coats, hidden in the shadows at the very back. I knew immediately that it meant something. I pulled the box out. It was heavier than I expected. The wood was old, maybe from the 70s, with a small latch that was slightly tarnished. My hands were shaking. I don't know why. I didn't know what I was about to find. But something inside me already understood that this box contained something my mother had worked very hard to keep from me. My sister appeared in the doorway. "Don't open that," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I turned to look at her. She was pale. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked smaller than I remembered her being, even though she was older than me. "What's in here?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just looked at the box, and then she looked away. "Emily, what's in this box?" "Please," she said. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Open it." "Why not?" "It's in Mom's closet. It's in our house. Whatever's in here, I have a right to know." She walked to the window and stared out at the street. "Mom made me promise. Years ago. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, if you found that box, I would tell you to leave it alone." "Leave it alone?" "It's been hidden in her closet my entire life. Don't you think that means something?" "It means Mom loved you," Emily said quietly. There was something in the way she said it that made me pause. There was resignation in her voice. There was something like grief that had nothing to do with our mother's recent death. There was a secret, and she had been carrying it alone for a very long time. I opened the box. Inside were stacks of letters, dozens of them, all in my mother's handwriting. I picked one up. The envelope was addressed to me, but it had never been sent. The letter inside was dated 30 years ago. I was 7 years old when she wrote this. I didn't even know what was happening in the world back then. I was worried about my second grade spelling test and whether or not I would make the baseball team. And my mother was writing me letters I would never read. I pulled out another, and another. They were all addressed to me. They were all from different years. Some were from when I was a child. Some were from when I was a teenager. Some were from recent years. My mother had been writing to me my entire life and never sending a single letter. What is this? I asked. Emily turned from the window. Everything she couldn't tell you. At the bottom of the stack, I found photographs. I pulled one out. It was a man I had never seen before. He was young, maybe in his early 20s. He had dark hair and eyes that looked almost exactly like mine. He was smiling, and in the background, I could see my mother. She was younger. She looked happy. Who is this? I asked. Emily closed her eyes. That's what Mom wanted to tell you. That's what all those letters are about. I kept looking through the photographs. More of the same man. Some with my mother. Some of him alone. Some of him with other people. A woman, children, a family that wasn't me. And then I found the journal entry. It was loose in the box, written on aged paper. My mother's handwriting was shaky, as if she had been crying when she wrote it. The date was 40 years ago. The month I was born. The entry said, I don't know how to tell him the truth. I don't know if I ever will. I looked up at my sister. Emily, who is this man? She sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked exhausted, as if the weight of this moment had been pressing down on her for decades, waiting for this exact second to finally be released. His name is Richard, she said, and he's not dead. The room went very quiet. The world went very quiet. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my family, about the man I had spent my entire existence mourning, suddenly came into question. What do you mean he's not dead? I asked. Mom told you he was dead so that you wouldn't have to live with knowing he didn't want you, Emily said. She was looking at me now, and there was sadness in her eyes that I had never noticed before. He was alive the whole time. He still is. And Mom made me promise never to tell you. I looked back at the photograph. I looked at the man's face. I looked at his smile. And I realized I was looking at the ghost that had haunted my entire life. The ghost was real. The ghost was alive. And the woman I had loved more than anyone in the world had lied to me about him every single day for 40 years. Emily left the room. I stayed there, holding that photograph, and I started to understand that my mother's death was not the end of something. It was the beginning of a much more complicated kind of grief. What would you have done if you found out your entire childhood was built on a lie? What would you need to know? And how would you ever forgive the person who loved you enough to protect you, but not enough to trust you with the truth? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my mother's bed with the box in front of me, and I read every single letter. The sun went down. The house went dark. I turned on the lamp on her nightstand, and I kept reading. The first letter was from 1985. My mother was 28 years old. She was alone. She was pregnant, and she was terrified. She wrote about meeting Richard at a bar on a Friday night. She wrote about thinking he was kind. She wrote about one night that turned into a mistake. She wrote about finding out she was pregnant and how she tried to tell him, but he was already with someone else. Someone he actually wanted to be with. She wrote about the day she decided to lie. The letters weren't really addressed to me. They were confessions. They were explanations written for an audience of one, but never meant to be delivered. My mother was talking to herself, trying to justify the choice she had made, trying to convince herself it was the right thing to do. In another letter, dated when I was 5 years old, she described taking me to the park. She said I asked her why I didn't have a father like the other kids. She said she told me my father was in heaven, and I had accepted it without question. She wrote, I wonder if I should have told him the truth. I wonder if keeping this secret is a form of cruelty disguised as protection. But every time I think about telling him that his father didn't want him, I can't do it. I can't put that pain on him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Another letter, from when I was 14, talked about a conversation she overheard between Emily and me. I had said I wanted to be like my father. I said I wished he had lived long enough to see me grow up. Emily had gotten very quiet, and my mother had noticed. She wrote about how Emily was struggling with the lie, how she had begged to tell me the truth, and how my mother had refused. She wrote about the distance growing between me and Emily, and how it broke her heart that she was the cause of it. By the time I reached the letters from the last 5 years, my mother's handwriting had become shakier. Her thoughts more fragmented. She was older. She was sick. She was running out of time. The final letter was dated just 3 weeks before she died. It was addressed to me, not to herself. To me. My darling son, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I put the letter down. I couldn't read anymore that night. I was too angry. The next morning, I called Emily. I told her to come over. I told her we needed to talk. And this time, there was no room for silence. When she arrived, I had the letters spread out across my mother's bed. I had the photographs arranged in chronological order. I had the questions written down on a piece of paper because I knew if I tried to speak without thinking, I would say things I couldn't take back. How long have you known? I asked. Since I was 15, Emily said. I found a letter Mom was writing. I wasn't supposed to find it, but I did, and I read it. And you never told me? Mom asked me not to. Mom asked you not to tell me that my entire life was a lie? Emily flinched. She asked me not to tell you because she was trying to protect you. From what? From the truth? From knowing my own father? From knowing that he didn't want you, Emily said quietly. From growing up feeling like you were rejected. From carrying that wound your entire life. I looked at my sister, and I realized she believed what she was saying. She actually thought she had made the right choice by keeping this secret from me for over 20 years. You should have told me, I said. Maybe, but Mom was so afraid. She was so afraid that if you knew the truth, you would spend your whole life feeling like you weren't good enough. Like your own father took one look at you and decided he didn't want anything to do with you. And instead, Mom decided to lie to me for 40 years? She decided to give you a father you could admire. A father who loved you so much that even death couldn't separate him from you. She gave you a hero instead of a man who was a coward. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street, at the neighborhood where I grew up, at all the places where I had walked with my mother, not knowing that she was carrying this secret the whole time. Do you know anything else about him? I asked. Emily hesitated. Mom kept a file. There's an address, an old phone number, some information about what he does for a living. She kept track of him over the years. She never contacted him, but she watched from a distance. Why would she do that? Because she needed to know if he was doing okay. Because she needed to know if there was any chance he might change his mind and want to know you. And because deep down, I think she still loved him. Or at least, she loved the version of him she had imagined in her mind. I spent the rest of that day going through the file Emily had retrieved from my mother's desk drawer. It was hidden behind other documents, buried under years of accumulated paperwork. But it was there, a complete record of my father's life. His name, his address, his place of work, the names of his wife and children, the facts of a life I was never supposed to know. I searched for him online. It took me 30 seconds to find his social media profile. And there he was, my father, still alive, still in the same city, 72 years old, surrounded by a family that was not me, a wife who was not my mother, children and grandchildren who had no idea I existed. I looked at his face, and I felt nothing but rage. This man had lived less than 20 miles from my house my entire life. I had walked past his street. I had driven past his neighborhood. We had breathed the same air in the same city for 40 years, and he had no idea I was alive. He had no curiosity about me. He had never wondered who I became or what kind of person I turned into. He had erased me from his life the moment my mother told him she was pregnant, and he had never looked back. My mother had spent her whole life protecting me from this man's rejection. But now that I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow it. I couldn't go back to living with the beautiful lie that had been carefully constructed for me. I wanted to call him. I wanted to tell him who I was. I wanted to destroy his perfect life the way he had tried to destroy mine. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain that I was feeling in that moment. I picked up my phone. I dialed his number. It rang twice. A man answered. His voice was familiar in a way I couldn't explain. It was like hearing my own voice coming from somewhere far away. "Hello," he said. I didn't speak. I couldn't speak. In that moment, I realized I had no idea what to say to him. I had no idea who he was or who I was supposed to be to him. The only thing that connected us was biology and a secret that had defined my entire existence. I hung up, and then I sat alone in my mother's bedroom, surrounded by letters and photographs and lies, and I understood something terrible. The truth doesn't set you free. It just trades one kind of pain for another. What would you do in his position? Would you confront your father? Would you let him live his life in ignorance? And how do you forgive someone for lying to you, even if they were lying out of love? I hung up the phone, and I sat in the darkness for a long time. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't move. I just sat there with my father's voice still echoing in my mind. That single word, hello, had opened a door I didn't know how to close. Emily found me that way. She turned on the light, and I could see her face clearly for the first time since we had found the box. She looked tired. She looked like she had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. "Did you call him?" she asked. I didn't answer. I stood up and went back to the closet. I pulled out the wooden box again, and this time, I looked more carefully at its contents. Beneath all the letters and photographs, at the very bottom, there was another envelope. It was different from the others. The handwriting on it was not my mother's. It was someone else's. It was dated 40 years ago. Inside was a single letter. It was from my father. My mother had kept his letter. She had read it. She had chosen to bury it. And now, after all these years, I was reading the words of a man who had decided my fate without ever meeting me. The letter was short. It didn't waste time with pleasantries or explanations. It was brutal in its honesty. I'm not ready to be a father. I don't love you, and I don't love her the way a family needs. I'm leaving. I'm going to start over. I'm going to be with someone else, and I'm going to have a life that doesn't include this child. Don't tell him I exist. It's kinder this way. Tell him I died. Tell him I was a good man. Let him imagine a father who would have loved him. Because I can't be that man, and I never will be. I read the letter 3 times. I read it until the words stopped making sense. And then I understood something that changed everything. My mother had read these words. She had absorbed this cruelty disguised as honesty. She had read that my father didn't want me, that he had chosen a different life, that he had decided I was an inconvenience in his path to happiness. And instead of letting me grow up with that knowledge burning inside me, she had rewritten the story. She had made my father into a hero. She had made his absence into an act of fate instead of an act of choice. She had given me a myth instead of a truth. And she had done it because she loved me more than she loved the honesty of the situation. I looked at Emily. He says he's not ready. He says Mom should tell me he died. Emily's face went pale. What? He told her not to tell me he exists. He told her to lie. Mom, Emily asked quietly. No, he asked her to lie. I sat on the bed, and I felt something shift inside me. It was subtle. It was gradual. But it was there. The anger that had been burning in my chest since I opened the box began to transform into something else. It transformed into understanding. My mother had not lied to be cruel. My mother had not lied to control me or to protect her own reputation. My mother had lied because she had been given an impossible choice by a man who couldn't face his own cowardice. She could tell me the truth and watch me spend my entire life feeling rejected by my own father. Or she could give me a story. She could give me a father I could admire. She could give me peace. She had chosen peace. I found the final letter then, the one Emily had told me about. It was sealed in an envelope that was addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, dated just a few weeks before she died. My hands were trembling when I opened it. My darling son, it read, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you found the box. By now, you know the truth about your father. I'm sorry it took my death for you to learn it. I'm sorry for every lie. But I need you to understand something. I didn't lie to protect you from pain. I lied because I loved you so much that I couldn't bear to see you hurt. I chose a beautiful lie over a cruel truth. And I'd make the same choice again. Your father was a good man in many ways, but he wasn't ready to be a parent. Rather than let you grow up feeling rejected, I gave you a different story. One where you were loved by a man who couldn't stay because fate took him. It wasn't fair to you, but it was the best I could do. I spent 40 years carrying this secret. I spent 40 years wondering if I had made the right choice. And I spent 40 years watching you grow into the most incredible man I could have ever imagined. You were brave. You were kind. You were everything I hoped you would be. And I did that. Not your father. I hope now that you're grown, you can forgive me. And I hope you can forgive your father too. He did what he thought was right. And so did I. We were both just trying to survive. We were both just trying to do the best we could with impossible circumstances. I love you. I'm sorry. And thank you for letting me be your mother. Love me. I read the letter until I had memorized every word. And then I cried. I cried for the woman who had loved me enough to carry this burden alone. I cried for the man who was too broken to be what I needed. I cried for my sister, who had been forced to keep this secret while watching our relationship suffer. And I cried for myself, for the childhood I thought I had and the childhood I actually lived. Emily held me while I cried. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to fix it or make it better. She just held me, and I realized that this was what love actually looked like. It looked like carrying someone else's pain. It looked like sacrifice. It looked like the choice to protect someone even when protection meant breaking your own heart. When I was ready, I told Emily that I forgave her. I told her that I understood why she kept the secret. I told her that she had been a good sister, even when being a good sister meant betraying her conscience. She cried too. And then I made a decision. I didn't call my father again. I didn't show up at his door. I didn't try to destroy his perfect life or make him understand what he had missed. Instead, I went to my mother's grave, and I stood there in the quiet, and I told her that I forgave her. I told her that I understood now, that the truth isn't always more important than love, that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is lie to protect someone else's peace, that she had given me the greatest gift any parent could give, a reason to believe in goodness, even when goodness isn't real. We all carry secrets. We all make choices we're ashamed of. We all hurt the people we love, sometimes with our honesty and sometimes with our silence. But I learned that love isn't always about telling the truth. Sometimes love is about knowing when the truth will break someone and choosing to hold it instead. My mother lied to me, but she did it out of love. My father abandoned me, but he did it knowing his own limitations. My sister kept a secret, but she did it to protect us all. And I spent my whole life believing my father was perfect, a hero taken too soon. And in a way, I was right, because in my mother's lie, she created the perfect father for me. She gave me someone to believe in. She gave me someone to admire. She gave me someone to love. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the truth isn't always more important than the love behind the lie. I forgive my mother. I forgive my father. I forgive my sister. And finally, I forgive myself for the anger I held onto for so long. Because I understand now, the truth does set you free. But sometimes, love sets you free first. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the secrets your own family might be keeping, if it made you question what you would have done in any of these positions, then please share it. Tell your friends about my Reddit diaries. Tell them about the stories we tell here, the hidden battles within families, the choices we make out of love, and the truths we sometimes choose to bury. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my Reddit diaries. We have so many more stories to share with you. Stories about families torn apart by lies. Stories about people fighting through impossible circumstances. Stories about redemption, forgiveness, and the complicated ways that love shows up in our lives. New stories every week. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about these stories. And thank you for being part of our community. I'll see you in the next one.